Welcome! Today we're diving into a really powerful piece of source material, simply titled, "The Rock Beneath You Has Never Moved." If you have ever felt completely burnt out, just totally overwhelmed, or like the ground beneath your feet is constantly shifting, well, this explainer is absolutely for you. The original text does a deep dive into how we find spiritual and emotional grounding in an otherwise chaotic world. It's this incredibly fascinating exploration of human exhaustion, our resilience, and the whole concept of a divine foundation. So, let's jump right in.
Okay, let's dive into this. What are you standing on right now? The source opens by challenging us to look at our own lives and really identify the fragile things we're relying on for stability. Because let's be honest, we all do it. We build our sense of security on these shaky surfaces, and when they inevitably shift or crack, we feel like we're literally falling. The text is asking us to take a really hard look at those foundational choices.
And that brings us to our first major theme: balancing on fragile ledges, or the exhaustion of moving floors.
Let's make this super concrete. The source gives us these incredibly relatable, everyday examples of what those fragile ledges actually look like. Think about a mother trying to hold her entire household together by the sheer strength of her smile. Or maybe a father whose whole self-worth is silently chained to a paycheck that randomly arrives late. It could be someone whose entire emotional state is riding on a child's unpredictable mood. Or even a widow trying to balance on the memory of someone who's gone. The author points out that relying on these things isn't some sort of character flaw, right? It's just what we learned to do when the ground of our childhood felt uneven. But here's the kicker. Balancing on these narrow ledges leads to a state the source vividly describes as exhaustion dressed up as vigilance. We basically spend our entire lives memorizing the movements of a shifting floor.
Now, what's really interesting here is how the author draws a sharp, almost jarring contrast between two totally different concepts, the ledge versus the bedrock. Ledges, like your career, your physical health, or even your relationships, are narrow. Sure, they're useful, often beautiful, and can be generous for a season, but they are completely conditional and highly vulnerable to cracking under pressure. Compare that to a divine bedrock. This kind of foundation is ancient. It is unmoving. It offers unconditional support, and the best part? According to the text, this bedrock does not check your worthiness before it agrees to hold you up. It doesn't ask for a resume. It simply holds you, because that is what it was built to do.
This contrast actually reveals a major critique in the text, bringing us to Section 2, the myth of self-reliance, and why doing it all alone is breaking you.
The source profoundly redefines what it actually means to be strong. We're constantly taught by culture that strength is like a lone tower, right? Standing all by itself, a trait we have to just muscle up and generate through sheer willpower. But the author argues the exact opposite. Real strength is a creature held by ground it did not generate. Just think about how our physical bodies are actually designed. Your lungs weren't made to manufacture their own oxygen. They absolutely require the air outside them. Your spine wasn't made to hold itself upright forever without the support of a chair. Literally, by design, we are meant to be supported by things outside of ourselves. To picture this, the author uses this absolutely brilliant metaphor of two trees. So imagine a tree planted in shallow soil. It might shoot up and grow super fast, looking incredibly impressive to everyone walking by. But the second a really hard storm hits, it completely falls over. Meanwhile, you have this slower growing tree. It's quietly, painstakingly putting its roots deep down through solid rock. Now, it might look kind of boring or unimpressive in its third year, but guess what? It is still standing strong in its 60th year. The source suggests that what looks like a quiet, maybe even boring life might actually be someone doing the invisible, essential work of discovering a real, permanent foundation.
So, what does discovering that deep foundation actually look like in real life? That takes us to the Hunted King's Song and finding a foundation in the wilderness.
You see, the historical figure of David wasn't just chilling comfortably in a palace when he discovered his bedrock. Not at all. Years before, he was promised a literal throne, but instead, he spent years in the wilderness being actively hunted by a king who wanted him dead. He was sleeping in these damp, cold stone shelters and caves at En-Gedi, just desperate and starving. Yet in this massive, defining cave moment, he actually has the chance to kill his enemy and end the whole chase. But he chooses restraint. He chooses mercy. And after this incredibly unfair, terrifying chase finally comes to an end, he sits down and writes a song of deliverance. He doesn't praise his own amazing survival skills or military instincts. Instead, he praises the foundation that held him up when absolutely nothing visible in his world was holding him together.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how he expressed that praise. The source breaks down 8 very specific names David used. He calls his foundation a rock, meaning a floor beneath all other floors. A fortress, which is protection for the vulnerable against an attacking army, kind of like your inner critic or an unapproving boss. A deliverer, like that one true friend who reaches down into a well to physically pull you out. He says, "My God," pointing to this incredibly intimate relationship, almost like a kid proudly saying, "My dad." He uses refuge, describing it like a tiny safe room during a massive storm. A shield, something that actually absorbs the blow before it can cut your skin. Horn of salvation, the raw, uncompromising power that literally picks you up off the dirt. And finally, a stronghold, a high watchtower that gives you the long view, totally taking the panic out of whatever obstacle is coming next. The source really shows how this isn't just nice poetry. It's this incredibly rich, multifaceted picture of ultimate support.
All right, which brings us to the really actionable part of the explainer. 3 steps to grounding and how to stop being a tightrope walker.
The source lays out 3 incredibly gentle, specific steps to help you shift your weight off those temporary ledges and onto something permanent. Step 1 is simply to pause and ask yourself, what am I standing on right now that doesn't depend on me? Step 2 is to take those small surfaces and return them to their actual size. And step 3 is to gently test this new bedrock, honestly almost like you're testing the ice on a frozen pond.
So, the crucial point is really captured right here in step 2. The author isn't telling us to just throw away all the good things in our lives. A paycheck is a good thing. A loving relationship is a good thing. The whole practice is about resizing them. A paycheck is just meant to be a paycheck. It was never supposed to be the footing for your entire personhood. A child's mood is just the weather of their particular day. It was never ever meant to be the weather of your soul. When you finally stop asking a ledge to act like a load-bearing wall, the ledge returns to its real place, and your soul? It finally stops being so deeply tired.
Then we get to step 3, testing the floor. And the source is just so compassionate here. It totally acknowledges that if you've had floors collapse beneath you in the past, your body is completely wise to be cautious. So it advises you to just bring your fear and your grief right along with you. You do not have to be unafraid to stand. Test the foundation 1 toe at a time. And as you do, you'll start to notice that the cracks you've been bracing for, they just stop happening. The author emphasizes that even if your physical body is failing, you are still held by something so much deeper. And honestly, this is beautiful. It notes that this bedrock keeps no clock. It has waited centuries for slower souls, and it will absolutely wait for you to be ready. To really drive this home, the original material offers this fascinating physical parable. It invites you to literally press the back of one hand into the palm of the other. Seriously, try it. If you hold it there, you feel the pressure of one meeting the resistance of the other. The text says, "Neither of us alone makes a foundation, the meeting of the two does." It's this incredible visualization of an ongoing, active partnership between our human vulnerability and divine support.
Let's move on and see how this all builds to the absolute core, recurring message of the entire piece. I am the ground beneath the ground you are standing on. Throughout the text, this isn't shouted like some demanding slogan. It's offered as a quiet, steady reassurance. It's a reminder that beneath every fragile ledge, beneath every chaotic, shifting circumstance in your life, an older, completely unmoving floor has been waiting all along to catch you.
Which leaves us with one final, pretty massive question to reflect on today. Are you ready to let yourself rest your weight on something that won't move? The whole point of exploring these concepts from our source material today is recognizing that you don't actually have to generate your own ground to stand on. You really don't. You just have to discover the ground that is already there. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep exploring these ideas as you find your footing this week.